All right. Welcome back to Tapped In. I'm Anna Summersett here with Benson Varghese, managing partner of Varghese Summersett. Today, we're talking about funnel to fit and how to hire a killer team. So let's just start off by being really honest. Hiring is hard.
Hiring is one of the most difficult things we do.
And it's not just about finding the right people, but it's finding the right processes for sourcing and onboarding and all of those things that are efficient and productive, but still are human. Would you agree, though, that when you get it right, it changes everything?
Having the right team members has literally meant everything to us. We still have a couple of our first employees at the firm here 10, 11 years later. And the culture has grown because of the people we have. And it's been so important to grow intentionally and maintain that culture. And it's all about the people.
Why do you think that hiring for startups or small businesses is so extraordinarily difficult?
There are really two sides to that coin, in my opinion. When you're small, one of the challenges you have is any one person that you add to your team can change the dynamic incredibly because they have an enormous impact. If you're a team of 4 or 5, adding your next person counts for a lot. When you're small, you don't have the reputation that you might achieve when you're bigger. So attracting talent is also more difficult. You are oftentimes truly a startup, and there's some energy and excitement that comes with that. But there's also the challenge of you don't have a decade or 2 decades of proven track record behind you that would attract a different type of candidate. I say there are two sides to that coin because when we were small, one of the advantages we had was being members of our local legal community. We were hiring people we knew, and essentially they were on lifelong interviews with us, and we knew we liked them. We knew a lot about their work product, and so we were very selective, and we were able to be selective when we were that small.
Well, unpack that a little bit, because some of those first hiring decisions for us at the firm were very difficult, financially, even though it was very easy to pick out from our community who we wanted to work with, right? You talk about these lifelong interviews. How do you accomplish that on a really small team?
Your first hires are so important because you're setting the tone for what's coming next. And you have to create that excitement. So yes, it was absolutely a reach, whether it was to hire our first associate or certainly to bring on the early partners that we brought on. We were looking for people who we looked up to, that we enjoyed working with, but we also knew they brought attention and excitement to the firm. We became a firm, a group of people that other people wanted to be around, that other people wanted to associate themselves with. So the tone you set, and we're still very mindful of that today, is so important. And people attract people who look like them, sound like them, perhaps have the same work ethic. So you want to be very careful about what you cultivate.
Well, and in those initial hires, and I remember we talked about this a lot during the first couple of years. We knew, being young lawyers, we were 5 years out of taking the bar whenever we started the firm, that we didn't have the reputation, whether it be by name or experience, to get any kind of referral business, to even be necessarily respected in the legal space yet, for anyone to really take us seriously. So I know initially it was very important to us to find someone who had an excellent reputation, who was very experienced, who was well respected. And in order to do that, most small firms, I think, believe it's about money. And as a startup, you don't have it, right? You just don't have these hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to be throwing around in your hiring funnel. So we had to find a way, I think, that was really important to distinguish ourselves from what everybody else could offer, because they could out-offer us on money. They could out-offer us on benefits. We didn't have benefits, if I recall correctly, right? When we started, we didn't have anything. So what were those points that we could offer as an advantage to help attract some of that top talent when we were still quite small and had very little on paper to offer?
Yeah, look at the first 3 partners we brought on, Steve Jumis, Christy Jack, and Letty Martinez. Steve was a federal practitioner, had a lot of federal experience at a time when I did not. Christy Jack and Letty Martinez were top of their game. Christy Jack is a household name, phenomenal trial attorneys who we'd known for a long time. And so when you're in that stage of being a startup and trying to attract talent, you're right. We had to think about, well, how are we going to set ourselves apart? Bringing on these types of attorneys certainly helped set us apart, but how did we do it? We were able to show we were doing things differently. So very early on, we were able to show, first of all, we could get the phone to ring. Second of all, we set ourselves apart in terms of our clients' journeys. We put a lot of time thinking about how do we provide the greatest client experience. And so even our peers, people in the legal community, were able to see Varghese Summersett, they're doing something different. Their clients leave great reviews. They're earning those reviews. They have an approach to conducting the law firm as a business as opposed to thinking about business as an ancillary to what you're doing.
Well, and I think that's a really important part, because I think sometimes lawyers fall into really 2 categories, which are attorneys who want to practice. They want to be writing the briefs, in the courtroom, arguing, handling client calls. And then you've got attorneys in the business space who love branding, marketing, anything in terms of financial or data analytics. And usually those aren't the same person, right? And so to the extent that we were starting the business and figuring out how to run the business, how to brand, how to separate ourselves, differentiate in ways that we could, the areas of the business we had control over, right? We didn't have control over how long we'd been practicing or how old we were, but we certainly had control over what our online presence looked like and how we presented the firm, to the community, and what type of service industries we were involved with. So the things that we had control over, we did. And I think what that showed the lawyers who just wanted to practice was, this is a place that has a process, that has a vision for how their client journey is going to go, who's organized, who has a CRM that's developed. And all I need to go in and do is what I do best, right? Which is go to the courtroom and practice law. And I don't have to worry about any of the other stuff. And I think that really helped us have those early conversations with the Christy Jackson and Letty Martinez and Steve Jumis, because they are just the best of the best old school trial lawyers who love the practice of law and only want to focus on that. And so finding people who know their strengths and then giving them the opportunity to only do that thing, I think that's what really made us a contender when they were looking for a place to land.
Absolutely. I remember the conversation I had with Christy Jack, and it went something along the lines of, you're a household name for being a prosecutor, but I will make sure your star is on the map as a defense attorney, and everyone will know who you are and that you're just as good on this side as you were ever as a prosecutor. And I promised her that she's never going to have to worry about, where does the paper come from? Who's the next hire? Where's the
How
next
do I
case?
set up my printer?
Absolutely. Where's the next case going to come from? You
Sure.
can come in and do the things you love doing. And as you're thinking about growing a law firm and attracting the right type of talent, you have to be aware of the needs of the people that you're trying to bring onto your team and let them do what they're best at. I'm always preaching, I want, frankly, technology to do the things that are mundane and repetitive so that my talent can do the things that they're talented at doing. And that goes to someone in intake, a paralegal, an attorney. We want you here to do the things you were trained to do and the things that you're passionate about doing.
So we've talked a little bit about some of those early hires that really cemented our place in the defense bar and in the legal community. What were some of the hiring mistakes we made early on?
I almost chuckle at one of the mistakes that I haven't quite figured out the exact mistake, but I know what I would do differently. We interviewed someone who did a tremendous job at the interview, was very outgoing, very well spoken, impressed everyone in the 2 rounds of interviews. And the person who showed up to work was nothing like the person who we interviewed. And in hindsight, what I would have done differently is not just ask the question of, what would your previous employers say about you? I would have, first of all, modified that question and say, what will they say? Not hypothetical. And I would have made the phone calls and I would have vetted them more thoroughly. It's easy in the legal profession to look at your immediate needs, go through your hiring process, believe you have the right candidate in front of you, and leave it there. We've got to do a better job at, and we've learned to do a better job at actually vetting our candidates and calling the references, not just making sure they have them.
Well, and I think that you kind of referenced this a little bit, making decisions because you have to, like when you're operating from a place of desperation, because you haven't done, the capacity modeling to know when you need to hire somebody 4 months before you need to hire them, right? So you don't have that leg up, especially as a small business. And if you're not engaged in that practice, you're always acting reactively, right? You're desperate for that person to come in. And I think it makes it really easy to overlook the things that kind of like make you scratch your head a little bit in the screening process or in the interview process, where you're like, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know that that's going to be a great fit here, but they've got 10 years experience. They seem to know what they're doing, and we really, really need somebody. Fast forward down the road 6 months, and it's absolutely not a fit. And now you're starting the whole process over. And it's not just the toll financially that takes, because hiring is an expensive process, but all the lost time and productivity and training somebody that you're not going to end up retaining. I think that's definitely a mistake that we've made, hiring out of desperation because we were growing so quickly. We just wanted a warm body to fill the seat, and they weren't the right person.
Even this week, we had the conversation about we will and should never lower the bar simply to fill a position. And that can cause some tension. I'll give you an example. You're a big proponent of allowing people to pivot from one position to another to help them find the best seat for them. And it's often the case that I push back because I think we are trying to find the round hole for the round person as opposed to the seat that they're in. But in doing so, we're making concessions. We're not saying... Who are you
calling a round person?
Fair. Bad analogy. But
you don't want to fit a square peg into a round hole. Is that what you mean?
No, what I mean is if you start with the idea that you're trying to pivot someone within the firm to a new position because they're not working out well in the first position, my concern is always, well, you're looking at a class of one asking if they're suited for that position, as opposed to the question I like, which is who is the best person for that second role?
I mean, I hear you on that. I think of it this way, which is a culture fit is very difficult to find, especially when you're very protective of your culture, right? We have a very, very high bar here for how we treat one another, how we support one another, how we show up day in and day out for each other and their families, for our clients. And I think that culture fit is harder to find than I think it is to train someone in any practice area for anything. And that's why I'm always a big proponent of pivoting people. And I also think that as the firm grows, the need by position changes, right? We actually, the list that somebody has for a specific position gets more and more narrow as we add people on, right? Because you don't have one criminal lawyer doing all the criminal things, right? You have associates doing lower level misdemeanors. You've got your mid-range, senior associates doing your more difficult lower level felonies. You have your partners handling capital cases and first degrees. And it is not a handle everything that comes across your desk. It's really fine tuning those positions to match the person and the experience who's sitting behind the desk. And I think as we fine tune those positions, it makes sense to pivot people into a seat that is better suited for their strengths. And people also change over time. I know you don't believe this, but I do think people change and people grow up. And we've hired people who started with us when they were 21 years old. I mean, and who they are at 21 and who they are now at 32 are very different people, right? Whether it's shaped by life experience or work experience. And as they start to understand themselves more, they start to become more protective of their passion, right? They start to really hone in on what they like to do. And I'm a big believer that people work harder and smarter when they love what they're doing. And I'd rather keep a good person and train them in some other space than lose them altogether and start over with an unknown entity. Did I convince you yet?
Not quite, but I will agree with you that the culture fit is very important for us. And we're always looking for good people. And if there's a good place for a good person, then I'm a proponent of moving them into that space.
I will say I've won this, though, a few times because we have pivoted like at least 3 people in the firm in the last 3 years. Would you agree that they're working out in their new positions?
We've had a number of pivots that have worked out well.
Okay.
Worked out exceptionally well.
So check one for me. What's one common myth or misconception about somebody who's like a great hire?
I think the greatest misconception is if you hire someone who checks all the boxes, they're going to work out well. And the reality couldn't be further from the truth. You can have someone with great experience, great educational credentials that is not a fit with your firm. You can have someone who checks all the boxes but brings drama to the workplace, which is something that we don't have any room for. There are negative behaviors that can take away from an A player's work to the point where it just doesn't make sense to keep them. And we've run into this where we've had highly productive people who did not fit the culture. They brought drama and couldn't stay.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I also think as a business grows, it changes. And I think when a business grows, you have to look at everybody you've hired and ask yourself the question, would I hire them again today? Right? Can they do this job as it is today the way they could do the job 5 years ago? And sometimes the answer to that is no. Right? And so sometimes a great hire means they're great for this season, but they don't either have the ability to or desire to grow. They don't have that growth mindset. And so as your business grows, you have to constantly be evaluating and reevaluating whether your great hire is somebody you want to retain for the long term. And I think that's something that's really difficult and controversial for people to think about because they think, well, they've been with me for this long. They're loyal. They're a good person. I should keep them indefinitely. Right? But if you have a certain set vision that you're unwilling to compromise on, I would say for you it's technology, right? With the development of your own CRM with Loft, you're uncompromising in that people need to integrate into technology and be on the cutting edge of everything that AI brings to the table and all the efficiencies and productivity. And I could absolutely see us having difficult conversations one day, should we ever have a team member who says, I'm just not willing to do that. Right? I'm not interested in learning that new skill. I think that would be difficult to reconcile with where the firm's going.
I think I've used the phrase, sometimes the person who took you to first is not the person that gets you to third or home. And that's very true. There are people who may be great fits at a certain stage of your growth who may not be the greatest fit as you grow. And technology is certainly something I'm unwilling to compromise on, but so is law firm growth, individuals who are growth minded. And I don't mean just in the sense of the law firm growing, but I want people who are lifelong learners, who want to improve themselves and their craft for as long as they're working. If you're happy with where you are and you want to stay where you are, you're probably not a good fit for what we're doing. And I agree, it changes over time.
Well, and releasing them from that obligation isn't doing them a disservice, right? They then get to find a place where they're happier because they're not in that constant grind of learning something new, right? They can just go in, punch the clock, do their 8 to 5 and go home. And so, yeah, I agree. Not everybody who's a fit today is a fit tomorrow. So let's talk a little bit about what a hiring funnel is and when you started to use one.
I remember distinctly going to a presentation put on by Jessica Mogul of CRISP and learning about their hiring funnel. And of course, they were teaching lawyers and law firms how to implement a hiring funnel for themselves. I spent a day in that seminar, and by the next week, we had implemented so much that truly refined our hiring funnel. So the idea of a hiring funnel is, well, it starts with the common problem we all have. If you post something online, for instance, you're going to get 100 applicants every couple of days.
And you're talking about sourcing, like finding candidates.
Absolutely. So the top of funnel is a mass of people. How do you get from that down to the folks that actually belong at your firm? And so, inspired by CRISP, we created a hiring funnel. One of the very first simple tweaks that I made adapting from something that CRISP does is in my job descriptions, if they're posted online, I'll say something along the lines of, to be considered, you must send me a paragraph about a book you recently read, and you've got to send it to this email address. And I put that at the very bottom. At the top, I say, make sure you read to the bottom in bold.
No, you made me like post a job description, I think on a local mom's channel that I was on one time. And I had people messaging me, it doesn't say how to apply. And of course I look at it and I'm a quick start, right? I'm not a detailed person. And so I look through it real quick and I'm like, it doesn't say how to apply. And I message you Slack. I'm like, you had me post this and there's nowhere to apply. And he's like, and you're like, did you read it? Did you really read it? I said, no. He goes, then you're not hired. And that's like part of the screening process, right? I mean, you're sourcing all these candidates and then you're screening them and trying to funnel down, right? How many get to move on to like the next part.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of one of the measures that you use.
Absolutely.
That's become really popular.
Very quickly, you're looking at some number between 2 and 5% of people who are actually reading the instructions and following them.
And which is like mind blowing to me, because these are people who are taking time to research jobs, to apply for jobs. They obviously need or want a job, and they're not even going through and following simple directions.
But that's the person you want to weed out. I completely agree. But I don't want the person who is sending out blanket cover letters and resumes or form letters.
You don't want a person who doesn't care about where they go.
Exactly.
You don't want a person who just wants a job.
I'm looking for someone who wants to be at Varghese Summersett. Mm-hmm. So the hiring funnel has many steps. They all either act as qualifiers or a measuring tool. So we use a variety of tests if you get past the second interview to help us understand your communication style.
It's not a test, it's an assessment.
Assessment.
It's different because you can't fail it, right? It's
Correct.
just like, who are you?
Correct.
You know, what motivates you? How do you work? How do you communicate?
Arguably, you can fail the Wonderlic or have a very bad score. But yes, the other two are assessments.
Well, and let's talk about that for a second, because that's kind of a funny story. So Wonderlic is almost an aptitude assessment.
Yes.
So does someone have the intellectual capability of fulfilling the obligations of this role? And when we were kind of transitioning into more of a leadership management position and away from practicing, you and I kind of defaulted into taking a lot of the operation responsibilities. And I knew that wasn't something I was naturally gifted at, right? It's something I had to learn out of necessity. I'm not passionate about operations. I'm not good at operations. I'm a quick start. I miss a lot of details. And so when we initially were trying out Wonderlic, I took it and I failed miserably. So badly. I was like, see, I can't do this job. You have to put me in something else.
It told you that position was not the best for you. And it was true. It is true.
It is true.
And we hired folks to help in operations, and we continue to expand that role to more positions. But those tools are very useful. So that's what the hiring funnel is, getting you down to the right candidate so that by the time you're interviewing quality and qualified candidates, and you're able to look for the qualities that matter to you and to your business as you bring them through the funnel.
Well, and even the people who are great at reading others, right? And really kind of getting to the core of somebody who is, who they are quickly. Things like Print and Colby, which help assess somebody's workplace motivations or their communication style and how they work, kind of cut through that noise and make it really easy. I mean, they assign numbers that for most people over the course of their life don't change. And you can match those numbers to people you already have in that position who are excellent fits, right? So I would say, for example, if somebody is a high fact finder with a high follow through, that's somebody who would usually work really well for us as a paralegal or some type of legal assistant, because they are doing a lot of drafting. It's a lot of detailed review of things. They have to, dot all their I's and cross all their T's. If you have somebody who's a high quick start like me, that's not somebody you would want to put in a detailed position. So it really helps cut through some of that noise and refine some of those things for you. So I agree that was a great move to help us with screening. So how do you typically source your candidates? Do you prefer an inbound strategy or an outbound one?
We use a combination of both. And I would say it varies quite a bit based on the position. For, I think, every attorney at our firm, we have been able to find them relationally. That doesn't mean there's not outbound work being done. We certainly post everywhere on social media, on LinkedIn. But the folks that have come to us and the reason we've been able to cultivate the culture that we have is we are hiring relationally. These are people who we know in the community or know of us, and it prompts conversations. I can't recall of an instance where we hired certainly a senior attorney that we did not already know from the community. That's much harder to do as you grow into new practice areas, and it's much harder to do when you're talking about staff. For staff, we absolutely have to have the posts on LinkedIn, on Indeed, and we use every possible avenue to get the message out that we're looking for good people. And in that regard, having a huge top of the funnel is great. I want as many applicants as possible so we can really find the best.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I agree. I can't find or think of an attorney we have that we didn't engage in relationally, that it wasn't an intentional conversation, either started by them or started by us, but certainly one that wasn't in response to an ad. Now we're currently considering somebody who responded to a job posting. So I think at a certain size, it does make sense. But why do you think it's important, right, for those attorney positions or management positions to be ones that you actually pursue?
Anyone, particularly if you've been to law school and your job is to advocate, can sell themselves, right? Anyone can look good on a resume. You can get through multiple rounds of interviews and look good. You can choose your references carefully so the folks that I call all have glowing things to say about you. But the proof is really in the pudding. What your peers think about you values so much. We strive to be attorneys who will give it our all in the courtroom, but can still shake hands or even go get a drink after, no matter how valiantly we fought in the courtroom. Those are the types of people I'm looking for. I'm also looking for folks who truly care about their clients. We don't want someone whose life's goal is to maximize their billable hours for the year. We want clients who will, for years to come, talk about how well they were taken care of. And some of those things you can only get through a deep understanding of who that person is that comes from more than just the interview process.
Because you're looking for their character.
Absolutely.
Right? Are you at your core a good person in addition to being an excellent lawyer? Right. So that kind of brings me to a controversial topic of poaching, which is how people reference, going out and approaching attorneys at other law firms about a new opportunity to work here. They're like, oh, you're trying to poach my people. What do you think about it?
It is a sensitive topic because despite Fort Worth being one of the largest cities in the United States, it's still a relatively small bar. All the attorneys know each other. The law firm owners are likely friends. So it is very personal. This is someone that they have hired, cultivated, and probably truly enjoy working with. But if your people would leave, you have to understand it's either because of a better opportunity, and that could be many things. It could be the drive is easier, the commute is easier, the quality of life is easier, the people that they're going to work with are more appealing to them, the types of cases they handle are more appealing to them. And so as business owners, we have to be able to say, we're going to do the best we can by our people. And if they choose to leave, great. That's a decision they made that was best for them. If someone were to, quote unquote, poach one of mine, I would ask myself the questions. Could I have done anything better? If not, then I'm at peace with the move that they made. And perhaps the next law firm owner is doing something better than I am and can pay them more. It could be any possibility, but I can only ask myself, what can I do better? And if it wasn't my failure that led them to leave, then great, I'm all for it.
So, I mean, I feel like I've heard you say before that your people are not poachable.
I think I've heard you say that.
Well, I think to a certain extent that's true,
Yeah.
right? Like I really believe in what we offer and how we support each other and the culture that we have. And to the extent that somebody would leave this firm to go work somewhere else, then I agree with you. The first question for me would be, what did we do wrong? You know, where can we improve or tighten up? Or why wasn't this person the right fit, especially when we believe that they were? You know, but I think sometimes those decisions are just out of your control, right? When you talk about things like somebody moved a house and this is closer to their kid's school or whatever the case may be. But I think what it raises for me is an interesting discussion around the assumption that people attorneys that work somewhere else are happy where they are. And this has come up a lot when we are engaging with people about opportunities here. I mean, I was meeting with an attorney not that long ago who was talking about their work experience and said, I never thought about another work opportunity because nobody has ever approached me and I've been unhappy for years. And that's pretty profound to think about. Like, we have such a culture against poaching. We have such a culture against going after each other's employees because it feels like this personal attack or competitive space, that you've got workers who are unhappy for whatever reason, whether it's personal or professional, who aren't afforded other opportunities because nobody will ask them to dance.
What's really interesting about that is we as employers have essentially the same limitations. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. There have been attorneys who have switched law firms or gone out on their own from the law firm they were with, and I would have never imagined they would leave. Therefore, I never approached them. I thought it was an impossibility. And I kick myself that I had not reached out and engaged them in a conversation. We have very good friends that had I moved a year sooner, we'd be working together, and we love them to death and are cheering them on in their own ventures. But you really can't hesitate, whether you're an employee or an employer, engage in those conversations. Really, that's what's going to foster us continuing to raise the bar.
Yeah, I agree. And I think engaging in those conversations with a certain amount of sensitivity and confidence. You know, when I'm engaging with attorneys in the local bar about opportunities here, it is always a high priority that those conversations are confidential. Usually at their request, because they're highly protective over, if this doesn't work out, right, I still have to work where I'm at, and I don't want there to be any hard feelings or make it more difficult. And so just being sensitive to that landscape, I think there's a lot of possibilities that can be opened up just by going to coffee and talking about where you're at. Is it a good fit? Is there an opportunity that could be a better fit for you? And always, always, always reaching out when you feel like somebody would be a great member of your team and not being dissuaded by where they're at.
Well, after this podcast, there won't be any more casual coffees. Everyone's going to be lasering in on what we're talking about.
I know. I'm going to take anybody to lunch as a friend. because everyone's going to think we're trying to take them, which we probably are. So what's your take on using test projects as part of your hiring funnel, for that screening process? We talked a little bit about the test questions and the kind of detail-oriented nature of the application itself. But once somebody gets past that point and past the initial screening interview, you do a test, like a qualifier. Talk to us about that.
Absolutely. So when you're coming in for generally your second or perhaps third interview, it starts off with a test. And the test is intentionally designed to be on paper, generally, unless you're in a position where we absolutely have to give you a laptop to accomplish the task. For example, the bookkeeper test would have been too difficult to do without Excel. And we give you a certain amount of time to work through that. The reason it's on paper is I don't want people getting on ChatGPT or Google to find their answers. I just want them to approach it as they would if a new case or problem came across their desk. Generally, they don't know that this test is about to take place, and it's usually a 1, max 2-page test. It's generally something they can accomplish in 10 minutes. That gives us some real insight into, without any prep, how would a person respond? Now, there are occasions, particularly if I'm looking to hire a virtual assistant, where I will have a paid test. In other words, it's a project that's going to take them a day. I don't want them to spend a day qualifying. I'll pay them for their time and look at their work product, because for a virtual assistant, I only care about the work product. All right. So depending on what we're talking about, we have different types of tests. The tests are, of course, all customized to that role. So generally what I'm doing, for example, if we're hiring a case manager, I'm getting our lead case manager to put together the test with us so that they are truly indicative of this person's capabilities.
Well, and that's one of the things that I love about your process is incorporating another person who's in that role already into the screening interview and into the testing process, because they're the ones who know that space the best, right? And they can figure out, is this person just using the right terminology, or do they really have a deep understanding of what these topics are? So as we kind of switch into the interview process, what are some green flags, so to speak, that you would see of someone you're interviewing?
One of the things that I'm looking for, and of course my perspective is different, often being the last person to interview them, but things that I'm looking for are someone, again, who is genuinely interested in Varghese Summersett. You know right off the bat if they've taken the time to research your firm, because they'll always tell you. They'll tell you what they know about the firm. They'll tell you what they know about the people and why they applied to work at Varghese Summersett specifically. I want
to stop you right there, because it's really important for me that this make it into the episode, that one of the best hires we've ever had, who's coming back full circle as an attorney, walked her resume in as a receptionist, like physically walked it in. I don't know that we've ever had that happen before. And I think it was only because she walked it in that we were like, I think we're going to put her through the hiring funnel and see if there's a position for her, because it was such a commitment to, I want to be here. Right.
Well, I remember Taylor Brumbaugh's interview, and we asked her, what made you drop off a letter in your resume at our door? Were we one of 100? And she said, no, I Googled best law firm in Fort Worth. She was a student at TCU at the time. And you were the one who came up at the top of the list. And I wanted to walk my cover letter and resume over. And I did, and I dropped it off. So it wasn't just that she took a unique path to get to us. She had a compelling reason, right? That's exactly what I'm looking for. And as you said, she stayed with us for a year, with our blessing, went to law school, has finished law school, has excelled, and we've invited her back, and she's accepted a position with us to join our personal injury division, and we're thrilled. But that harkens to so many things we've talked about. The right person, someone who loves our culture, loves what we're about, knows that we're unique in the space, and we have invested in her. We both went to celebrate her, and I was able to hood her for her graduation from law school.
Yeah. Yeah. So commitment to understanding the business that you're applying for, and doing your research and actually caring about being part of that company. But what role do you think the company has in attracting the people that they're interviewing, right? I think so many people look at this from the perspective of we're trying to funnel people down and we're trying to weed people out and we're testing them and we're asking all these detailed questions. How important do you think it is that the company be attractive throughout the process?
As you put it, it's a dance, and you have to be just as good on the dance floor if you're going to expect someone to come up and dance with you. And we put a lot of thought behind that. When we talk about outbound work, if you go to a career specific page on our website, so anything under the career umbrella, you're not just going to find a job description that's very unique, that reflects who we are. You're going to find videos of people who work here and talk about what it's like, videos from us that explain the type of person we're looking for and somewhat tongue-in-cheek, the type of person we're not looking for. Mm-hmm. So we do as much as we possibly can to let people know how we're different. And hearing it directly from employees matters a lot more than we've won a lot of awards, but best places to work amongst them. It matters more than those awards and badges.
So when you're evaluating somebody you're interviewing, and let's say they've got those green flags, they researched the firm, they're committed. When it comes down to your evaluation, what's more important, skills or potential?
I know what your answer is going to be.
Do you? Do you? Because a woman loves it when a man tells her what she's thinking.
I know. Well, I know you well enough to know your answer. But here's how I look at it. Skills are table stakes. You have to have the skills for me to have a conversation with you. Potential is related to that core value of the growth mindset, right? I want to know that you want to grow, because if you want to grow, I can help you grow and I can help you achieve all the things that you want to achieve. To me, that's where potential comes in. And certainly we've had just remarkable people come through our doors and stay with us who showed potential, and they've borne that out over time, and it's been incredibly good for them and for us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and my answer would have been potential, by the way. But I think the reason why mine is potential is because a skill set can change as an industry changes, right? So people who were skilled in a specific type of legal work 20 years ago, that skill may look very different now, right? And it should, with how far technology has come, with drafting, with the incorporation of AI, that skill set.
Are we taking down our typist position?
Do we have a typist position? Funny. So, yeah, I mean, I think skills change over time. So, like, one thing that I really struggle with as a manager is helping people unlearn bad habits, right? And that, to a certain extent, that can be more than half of your training. So I prefer almost a blank slate in certain aspects. Now, there are certain skills that you, like you call it, or table stakes. You know, for your trial attorneys, we are looking for significant trial experience. I can't replicate that here at the firm, right? You have to have been putting in years of that before you apply for those positions. So those are kind of non-negotiables. But when it comes to how you do things or what your process looks like or how you incorporate technology, I would much prefer a blank slate with somebody with a growth mindset and a lot of potential, because I think it'll be faster and easier to integrate and train them in the Varghese Summersett way, as you like to call it.
So I'll give away a little secret. And of course, I have a slightly differing position on this. I actually like folks who have had at least one previous bad employer.
Because it makes you look better?
No, because then they truly understand how we're different. Mm-hmm. Think about our experience. We've been in places where, as I put it yesterday, I've been at a place where I got to work and sat in my car for 5 minutes thinking about, I've got to go do this again. I don't want that to ever be the case here. And if you've had a bad experience in your life, you know the difference. If you graduate from school, college, and come here, and this is the only thing you've ever experienced, it's hard to put that in perspective. You don't quite understand what the rest of the world's like.
Right. So to that end, have you ever hired someone that you thought was kind of middle of the road, maybe a solid B player, who really turned out to be a star?
I can't. I'm hard pressed to think of intentionally hiring B players because that's not what I'm looking for. But have folks far exceeded expectations? Absolutely. And have they grown with us in remarkable ways? Yes. We've had people change the course of their lives as they had planned it.
Right.
Some people who thought they were going to go to law school find it so rewarding to be here, and they had grown so much that they got more fulfillment here than incurring 6 figures of debt and going to law school. And they've made a choice in their life, quite the opposite of what Taylor did, and have also found success. Right. And so, yes, absolutely, people have exceeded expectations.
Well, I think there's probably a correlation there between those people with a growth mindset, with potential, and the recognition that this is a different place to work. So I do believe, like with our career paths that we've laid out, there is unlimited potential for people, right? And it's really up to what they want to pursue, how quickly they want to pursue it, because we'll invest heavily in the resources necessary to make sure that they can meet their goals and meet their targets. And so I think for the people who understand this is a different place to work and they want to take advantage of it, that's where we see the most growth, right, in them individually.
And by career paths, of course, what we're referring to is an individualized, customized plan to get the person from where they are today to where they want to be. And that could be a higher position in their division, or sometimes it's, hey, I'd love to be in this other division. What do I need to do to acquire the skills to get into that division?
Like a pivot, like pivot chairs into a different division. Yeah, we do that. We do that successfully. So let's talk a little bit about culture before we kind of wrap up this section on hiring and putting together a killer team. When we're talking about firm culture, what is it that you think has changed about company culture with the introduction of remote work? And do you take a position on it one way or the other?
I really detest remote work, and I know that's not a popular thing to say. And the reason I say that is we have invested so much into finding the right people, cultivating the folks that we have, creating an environment where there's no drama. Again, I think we are an exception to the norm of what law firms look like. So I want people here. You want them to experience all of that. I want people to experience that, and I want them to carry that on, right? It's a concern that we had when we grew from 1 to 2 offices and now 4 offices. I'm concerned with how do other locations absorb that, much less if you're at home. Now, the exception that I will consider is if someone has been with us for a long enough period of time where they are part of our culture and they say, I'd like to work 2 days from home. That's a conversation I would have. Because they already know kind of the ground rules, so to speak. They already understand what's important, why it matters. They already understand our culture. They're invested in our culture. They're part of it. And by being here at least part of the time, they're still interacting with the folks that are the fabric of that. Right. So when we look at how we're hiring in the future, is there a way that you anticipate, selling the company to people that we're talking to? Like, how do you get across this vision that you're talking about? Well, just as I think the proof is in the pudding for people, I think the proof is in the pudding for law firms. What we've done in the last 11 years tells people a lot about where we're going. And whether you've been around for 3 months or 30 years, that's important. For us, creating the excitement about where we're going is important because people have to understand, one, that we're not resting on our laurels. I'm not trying to become the biggest, but I am always trying to be the best at whatever level I'm at. But with that growth mindset, there is also constant change. With growth, there's a lot of change, and people have to be comfortable with that, right? And so we try to create transparency in what we're doing. And I know that'll get chuckles from a lot of people because I'm somewhat
cloaked in secrecy,
somewhat of a lockbox.
And privacy.
But part of that is, although I share with my division leads what my 5-year plan is, I try not to create alarm amongst the rank and file by talking about all the things that we're trying to achieve. And that's true of any aspect of what we're doing. The growth that we've seen in Loft over the last 3 years is, in my mind, unprecedented. There's been no self-funded enterprise that has picked up and catered to the needs of a law firm the way we have. And we're constantly, every 2 weeks, rolling out updates so that this team can have the best tools. And that's just one example of, yes, there's constant change, but it's constant improvement. And all we can do is be transparent about where we're going.
Well, and I think one of the things that helps with getting across that vision, in addition to being transparent about what your goals are, is that you're very present, right? We are not absent leaders. We, aren't gone by 11 a.m. every day and take vacations every other week. We are very much here in the trenches with this team saying, we're going where you're going. We're going to lead the way, and we're going to work right alongside you as we do it. And I think that's really important for people to feel like you're every bit a part of the process, that you're not going to ask them to do anything that you're not willing to do. So, putting in the long hours, doing the grind, being present, being available, I think is really important for people to really understand what that vision is and how they could be a part of it.
Absolutely. I think it's unfair to expect a work ethic that you don't demonstrate. And until we recently hired someone that gets here at 6:30, oftentimes I was the first person to get here, and oftentimes I'm the last to leave. Part of that is because I want folks to know exactly what you said, that we are invested, that we will do whatever it takes. I'm not expecting anyone else to put in an 80-hour week, but I want them to know that whatever their needs are, we will be here and meet them.
Well, I think we pretty much covered it, for the hiring funnel to the interviews to creating an attractive culture. What is one key takeaway that you think is important for small business owners or law firm owners from this episode when they're looking into creating maybe their first team?
One key takeaway I would have for anyone building a team is to not let the urgency of your need dictate who you hire. And that's a very difficult thing to do, because you feel like you're letting the rest of the team down if you don't hire quickly and you want that position filled. But the reality is you have to be patient enough to get the right person. And that is very difficult. It's easy if you're using multiple people to help you interview, for the interviewers themselves to just subconsciously lower their standards because they know the need is acute. What I've been trying to impress upon our leaders is, if we need to find Band-Aids for the situation, if we need to outsource to get some help, if we need to hire a virtual assistant, if we need to use one of these third-party record retrieval companies, or even prepare a summary externally, I would rather consider those than rush to judgment, to picking a person. It's not ideal, but it's better than hiring the wrong person.
Yeah. Well, my takeaway would be that if you are currently working in a place whose hiring process doesn't incorporate any of these things, then they're not incredibly protective of their culture or you. So if that's the case, give me a call. My number is 817-203-2220. We'd love to chat. But that's it for Tapped In. If you guys have any comments or any bits of your own advice, feel free to drop them below and like and subscribe to hear our next episode.